Hey everybody, I am Brady Briggs. Welcome to another episode of the Combat Logic.
What's going on, guys? Today I want to recap UFC 273. This happened this past Saturday. Starting off the card was Julio Arce versus Daniel Santos. Well, this was a really good fight. Santos really brought it to him. It was his UFC debut, but Arce was able to use his experience and his footwork, and he was chased down the whole fight, but he outstruck Santos the whole fight too. Aside from the first round, Santos really put it on and landed some pretty effective strikes, man. He landed a really solid elbow, cracked Arce right in his temple, but he didn't wilt, and he got the win. He's back on the winning track following his defeat to Song Yadong. It's glad to see that. I love Julio Arce. Alexei Oleinik was able to get Jared Vanderaa down, and I really, really wish he was still had fought Ilir Latifi. You know, that was booked twice in the last month, but Latifi was forced off and was replaced by Jared Vanderaa, and Oleinik is able to get him down and get him in a scarfold. This was his 60th win of his career. He ended his 3-fight losing streak, and he is the first fighter to secure a victory across 4 different decades, which is just remarkable. All right. Opening up the prelims was Mike Mallet and Mickey Gall. This was a pretty good fight too, but man, Gall's career hasn't gone quite like a lot of us thought it would. I don't know why a lot of people had high hopes for him just because he beat CM Punk. I got pretty high hopes for him after he beat Sage Northcutt. Now, I know Sage Northcutt was super hyped too, but Mickey Gall submitting him was really impressive to me. Sage was by far more experienced. Gall was only 3-0 going into that fight. But Mike Mallet is able to hurt him and finish him with strikes midway through the first round. It was upsetting. I wanted Gall to win, but we might have a new prospect in our hands in Mike Mallet. Raquel Pennington looked incredible against Aspen Ladd. Man, like her boxing, just her straight boxing has improved so much over the years. Like, and she looks like she hits pretty damn hard too. It's surprising to see she only has 1 knockout win. And that was before she even got into the UFC. That was her very first fight, her very first win. But now after losing to Amanda Nunes, she then lost to Jermaine Durandamy. She then beat Irene Aldana in a very, very, very close fight. She then lost to Holly Holm for the second time. By this point, she was 10-8 as a professional. She's now won her last 4 straight fights, which is really impressive. Like, what a career turnaround she's had. Super cool to see. Her record is crazy, man, because she came to the UFC at 3-3, then beat Roxanne Modafferi, then lost to Jessica Andrade, 4-4. She then beat Ashley Evans Smith and lost to Holly Holm then in their first fight. She's now 5-5. Over her last however many fights, she's 9-3 in her last 12. Like, that's a better record than her official record. Like, she's done so well for herself lately. Anthony Hernandez absolutely mauled Josh Fremd. Now, Fremd did show some promise because he got, like I said, absolutely mauled throughout the first couple of rounds, and he still had some energy to stand up and throw some nice strikes. But Hernandez, he's turning into a problem for a lot of guys now. Of course, he's the man that just submitted Rodolfo Vieira last year. That was 14 months ago. He just picked up his first fight in 14 months against Fremd and got another win. Now, something I want to say about Anthony Hernandez, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know, he beat Brennan Allen for the LFA middleweight championship in his fight prior to joining. In his fight prior to joining the Contender Series. He was only 5-0 going into that fight, and he won it over 5 rounds. He beat Brennan Allen, which is incredibly impressive. Then he ran right through Jordan Wright on the Contender Series, just knocked him out, starched him in 40 seconds. The win was overturned because he tested positive for marijuana, but he still came to the UFC. Once he got to the UFC, he got choked out by Marcos Perez. Then he choked out Jun Young Park, and then he fought Kevin Holland, someone who Brendan Allen had beat, and he just got dusted in 39 seconds with a vicious knee to the body followed by some punches. Since then, he's had 2 really, really impressive wins. I'm excited to see what's next for him. Then Ian Gary and Darian Weeks. Darian Weeks shows a lot of promise, to be honest. He's now 5-2. He's lost his last 2 fights, but he showed us some good stuff in both of them. And Ian Gary, the Cage Warriors champion, he came over to the UFC in his last fight. He got a first-round knockout, and he followed that up with this win over Weeks. Now, it was really good to see him go the distance in a fight where he was tested, because he's still young. He's like 23, 24 years old. And it's really good to see he's got the grit in him. And there's another fighter I'm going to mention that about in a couple fights here. Opening up the main card, Mark Madsen beat Vince Pichel. Now, they really hyped Madsen up a lot going into this fight, which is cool. I'm glad they did. He's a 3-time Olympian. He's a silver medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling in the Olympics. He's a 5-time world champion gold medalist. Like, he's one of the best pure wrestlers, if not the best pure wrestler in the sport right now. He's also a very good athlete, and he picks things up very quick. His striking has gotten pretty good. Now, Vince Pichel gave him some problems. He opened up the fight with a leg kick, and then Madsen followed it up and returned a leg kick, and then he kept going with it, and it was pretty effective against Pichel. He tries to throw a combination about midway through the round, misses every single punch, and then goes back to his leg kicks, which are working. Then he secures a takedown toward the end of the round, and also toward the end of the round, before he secured the takedown, he was able to find the range with his punches. Now, Pichel started leg kicking him, and it was working for Pichel too. But Madsen, his wrestling is just too good, man. And he says how he wants to be a champion, and I just don't see that happening. You know, if he fights Justin Gaethje, 10 times out of 10 he gets knocked out. If he fights Charles Oliveira, 10 times out of 10 he gets finished by a knockout or submission. And that's just a couple guys. But he went 3 for 3 on takedowns. And there's something I see of him, and I've seen it in a couple of his fights now, to where toward the middle of the second round, he kind of falls off a little bit. Like, he starts fatiguing, and he needs to, catch his breath. Sometimes he'll get all pointed for the rest of the round. And then in the third round, he comes back and he's fresh and he gets a second win and he ends up winning. That's just something I've seen of him. He does fatigue. He does get tired. And that's where I think against the best guys in the world, especially at 37 years old, he's going to be 38 in September. I just don't see it going well for him. But he is now 12-0 as a professional, 4-0 in the UFC. I'm very excited to see what's next for him. And then Mackenzie Dern and Tecia Torres. This was a really good fight. Now, Torres was able to use her striking on the outside, which is surprising because she's a very, very short woman in stature. Dern's boxing looked okay. Torres's side kicks to the body are really what stood out to me as far as she goes in this fight. And Mackenzie, I think she went for like a flying triangle or a flying armbar or something, didn't lock it up immediately. So she stays tied up. She stays like climb up on Torres. And she then climbs up higher and scoots higher and goes around her neck. I think she's going to go for a guillotine, but she doesn't. She goes around the neck and then goes for the arm. And Torres, to her credit, didn't get submitted. It's really remarkable, especially with Mackenzie Dern. She's literally she's the best female grappler in the entire world. Like, the only person that's recently beat her is Gabby Garcia. And that woman is like 280 pounds. Okay. And she also beat Gabby Garcia. She's the best female grappler in the world. And Torres stayed in that standing position for over a minute while getting her arm cranked on. And eventually she's forced to the mat with it. And it looks so close to being finished, but Mackenzie isn't able to do it. And she ends up on bottom where she locks her up. And I don't know, it's really weird. Like, I feel like if she would have just moved her left leg to the other side of Torres's head, she would have locked up a triangle, but she was going for something else. She ends up going for a leg toward the end of the round. And we think she's going to get a knee bar too, but Torres is able to survive. And yeah, she's able to survive the third round as well. No, Torres is now 13-6 as a professional. After losing 4 straight, she's now 3-1 in her last 4, only losing to Dern by split decision, mind you. Torres still hasn't been finished as a professional, which is just remarkable. When you see the girls she's lost to, all of her losses, Rose Namajunas, current strawweight champion that finishes everybody. Jessica Andrade finishes a lot of girls, especially at 115 pounds. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, former champion. Weili Zhang, former champion. Marina Rodriguez, 16-2-1 as a professional, only lost a split decision to Carla Esparza. And she's also the most recent person to defeat Mackenzie Dern. And then Mackenzie Dern. She has only lost to the very best of the best of the best. And she's the smallest strawweight on the roster, and she hasn't been finished by any of them. There's really something to be said about that. This next one, Khamzat Chimaev versus Gilbert Burns. Remember when I said we were going to talk about someone who had some heart? We didn't know that Khamzat had heart. So many people are good hammers. Okay, we see this a lot in fighters. They're good hammers, but they're not good nails. You know, Conor McGregor, for instance. When he's getting beat up, he doesn't seem to do too well, aside from his Chad Mendes fight. We didn't know about Khamzat Chimaev because he was only 10-0 as a professional, and he literally ran through everyone. He was 10-0, 10 finishes, 4-0 in the UFC. There's a reason he was as hyped as he was. But going into this fight with Gilbert Burns, the last guy he fought was Li Jingyang, and I think he was ranked at number 11 or 12. And I'll be honest, I love Li Jingyang, but that's a very generous ranking. I do believe he's a top 15 guy, not just outside the top 10. He's like 15, 16, something like that. So that was his most recent win, and that was technically the best fighter he'd fought other than Gerald Mearshart. I mean, Mearshart went 3-0 with 3 submissions last year. Khamzat knocked him out in 14 seconds or 17 seconds, like really quickly. And yeah, we'd never seen him tested. He was always the hammer, and a really, really heavy hammer at that. Now, going into a fight with Gilbert Burns, someone who's fought the champion, someone who almost knocked the champion out, someone who's coming off a win over Stephen Thompson, someone who's fought the likes of, you know, Damian Maia, Tyron Woodley, and Alexei Kunchenko, who was 20-0 and like a 4 or 5-time M1 champion at that point. Dan Hooker. There's so many wonderful fighters Gilbert Burns has fought and beat. He's the number 2 guy in the world. Khamzat, man, what a step up it was, and what a showcase he put on. Like he almost got knocked out a couple times, man. It really worried me because I wanted him to win the fight. I love seeing prodigies come up, but he got knocked down a couple times. He knocked Gilbert Burns down a couple times. This is the best fight of the year so far, and to do that with a guy like Gilbert Burns, like he secured 2 takedowns out of 3 attempts, which is still a good percentage. Gilbert Burns can wrestle really well too. He out-wrestled Tyron Woodley handily. I know Tyron wasn't what he was at one point, and at that point, that's still very impressive. And Chimaev didn't really play the ground game too much with him. He went toe-to-toe on the feet, and even after getting hurt, he still marched forward and threw heavy shots. We saw him get tired in the 3rd round, and we saw him rebound and, you know, get his 2nd win and win the 3rd round. Such an impressive performance, man. Like, I saw memes come out after this fight was over, and it said, Khamzat Chimaev is not ready for Kamaru Usman. And you're right. He's not ready for Kamaru Usman. But he showed us he's for real on Saturday night. He showed us he can battle through adversity. He can get wins over anyone in the top 5. Dude, if he beat Gilbert Burns, that means he has a potential of beating Leon. He has a potential of beating Colby. In a year or so, he has a potential of beating Usman. Like, maybe he could even beat Usman because of how much he grows from this fight. But, dude, I'm so blown away. Like, this was the first decision win of his career, and he did so well. Now, it was a close fight, but I do believe the judges got it right, 29-28 for Khamzat. I think he won the 1st and 3rd rounds. But, yeah, I'm super excited to see what's next for him. I think the UFC, Dana White said he wants to see him fight Colby next. I would love to see that, or even the Leon fight if they could rebook that. One of those 2 names, or the Bilal Muhammad versus Vicente Luque winner, especially if it's Vicente Luque, especially if he beats him again. Him and Khamzat would be really good too. The next fight, Aljamain Sterling versus Peter Yan. Man, these 2 are just meant to have controversy together in their fights. I mean, what can we say? Like, the first fight was closer than I remembered it after I rewatched it earlier last week, rather, probably about a week ago. I rewatched it, and it was closer than I remember, but I still gave it the Yan 3-1. No, that fight went 4:29 into the 4th round. I think it should have been a technical decision. I don't think it should have been a disqualification, but it is what it is. And going into this fight, it was much different. Honestly, I thought it was going to look a lot like the first fight did, just with Aljo being more reserved. And Aljo was more reserved for sure, but it's not what I thought it was going to be. So the first round, Peter Yan controls the center of the octagon. The striking is pretty even. Neither of them do much at all, but Yan is walking him down the entire 5 minutes. Okay. And Aljamain shoots on some takedowns. He misses them all. Okay, going to the second round, Aljamain is able to really quickly take Peter's back, and he keeps his back the whole round. And we think, it could be over very soon. Jan's very tough to finish. Obviously, he's never been finished, but there's not many people that have a better back maul than Aljamain Sterling. And that's a fact. So it was really dangerous for him. And that round could have been a 10-8 round. I could agree with 10-8 or 10-9, but that was a very dominant round for Aljamain Sterling. And the second round was more of the same, just not quite as dominant. He was able to take his back in a scramble again, and he kept his back for the rest of the round. So at this point, Peter Yan is down by a round going into the fourth. Peter wins the fourth and he wins the fifth. No one disputes those. No one disputes round 2 or 3. They both belong to Aljo. No one disputes rounds 4 and 5. Both belong to Peter Yan. The disputed round was the first round. And some people believe it was the right call. Some people don't think it was. Like Dana White said, he had it the other way. He had it 48-47 for Yan. And that's what I agreed with. I think there are 2 correct ways to score this fight, and only 2, in my opinion. 48-47 for Yan. He won the first, 4th, and 5th rounds, or 47-47, giving Aljamain Sterling a 10-8 round in the second. I could easily see either of those as justifiable scorecards. But 48-47 for Sterling, I do not agree with. And he said in the post-fight press conference, yeah, I don't know what that one judge was thinking, but yeah, thank God the other 2 got it right. And it's like, I don't think they did. But that's my opinion. A lot of people have that opinion too, but it is what it is. Now, Peter Yan is 0-2 against Aljamain Sterling, when a lot of people think he should be 2-0 against him. That's an interesting topic of discussion. Now, it looks like TJ Dillashaw is going to get the next fight for the belt. He got injured in his last fight against Corey Sandhagen, of course, so he wasn't going to be ready until the summer anyway. Well, spring just came around a couple weeks ago. TJ should be healthy soon. And Dana White said Yan and Sterling, that fight will always be there, which I agree with. I like that fight a lot. I like TJ and Aljo. That's a wicked fight. I think it should be TJ versus Yan, but hopefully we get to see that someday too. And honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing Peter Yan go to 125 pounds. I don't know if he can make the weight. And he's a very, very strong bantamweight, but he's not a big bantamweight. I'd like to see him in both weight classes, honestly. And Henry Cejudo stated an interest in coming back because of these last 2 fights, Sterling versus Yan and then Volkanovski versus Jung. Man, Chan Sung Jung, it wasn't quite like his Brian Ortega performance. Like, he really just laid an egg in that fight. He came out swinging. He was trying to knock Volkanovski out, but dude, he was just 3 steps behind the whole fight. Volkanovski was so quick. He was so accurate. And he got the stand-in TKO early in round 4 considering. I'm glad it was stopped then. It should have been. It was a great stoppage. Alexander Volkanovski remains the champion. All the more reason I think they should have gave Josh Emmett the fight, but it's all said and done now. What's next for Alexander Volkanovski? Is it Max Holloway? Because they need to get their trilogy going. All right, now we gear up for UFC Fight Night 206 or UFC Vegas 51 and Bellator 277. Thank you all for watching. Have a good one.